Hello and welcome to the Albion Obsessed podcast. You join us on this live edition as we are here to dissect the victory today over Bournemouth. But before we get into any of that, let's see who we've got on the show tonight. We welcome Joe. Joe, my friend, how are you?
Hello, Tom. Yes, I am very, very, very good. I tweeted this morning that I wasn't feeling very up for today, and I prayed for the Albion to change my mood, and my God, they changed my mood. Just before we go on to the other guys below me and introduce them, I just want to give a really quick shout out to somebody who watches this podcast. I met him and his dad on the way to the Europa League game. A guy called Sonny. I know you're watching this, and thank you for all your support. It was really great to meet you. So there's your shout out, mate. I did promise you. But yeah, all good, mate.
Decent. And we welcome the first of our international panel tonight. We welcome back Dagan. Dagan, my friend, how are you?
I don't know that I'm worthy of being called part of an international panel, but I'll take it. I'm fan-darntastic, Tom, right? We've coined the phrase. We'll use it again. Fan-darntastic. Happy about the bounce back ability of this Brighton bunch. Talk more.
Most definitely. And we also welcome special guest tonight, Phil. Phil, my friend, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing unbelievably. I'm sure as the listeners will begin to formulate, I'm an Australian that somehow manages to find himself in Brighton for the first time, and I've just been to my first game at the Amex, and I'm just absolutely buzzing right now. It was just unbelievable, and yeah, so it's an honor to be on the show as well, as I'm sure we're going to get into. But this podcast has been a part of my somewhat brief Brighton fandom experience.
Oh, that's really great to hear, Phil. Now, I did say to you off air, before we get into any sort of the match that you've been to today, I'd just like to get your journey. So how did you come across Brighton and Hove Albion? What was it about Brighton and Hove Albion from, halfway across the world that made you go, yeah, actually, these guys are the team I want to support?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I know that there's going to be some cynics out there because it is a more recent addition to the clan, I suppose. But I joined the Brighton train basically at the start of last year. I grew up as more of a passive footballing fan. For context, I'm a sports journalist from down under, and I grew up playing soccer down there, and then rugby more recently. My fandom was more sort of in the rugby background, I suppose, and Aussie rules as well. But I was sort of a more passive Newcastle United fan growing up. And when that ownership situation happened, I thought, I'm going to get serious here. I can't stomach that. I'm going to go on the hunt for a new team. So I ended up speaking to a bunch of mates that were right into the Premier League and sort of shortlisted a group of teams which sort of more closely aligned with my values, I suppose. And I am one of the more sort of nerdy sports fans out there. And, I suppose given that I'd made that decision, it was important that I picked a team with an ownership structure that just kind of spoke to me a lot more than what Newcastle's does now. And that's kind of how I landed on Brighton. The sports betting industry is not perfect, but the sort of the poker background as well. The fact that Tony Bloom uses those elements to the way that he actually builds his roster and builds his team. I'm massively into fantasy sports. All of that kind of spoke to me. I come from a beachy place in Sydney. I'm a bit of a green thumb myself. There was just about 5 or 6 things lining up for Brighton to be the team, and that's where I've landed. And obviously since then, it's just been a ridiculous ride.
That's amazing, Phil. I mean, it's what we love about on the Albion Obsessed is we love to get different perspectives of different fans, and to us, it doesn't matter whether you've been supporting Brighton for 3 decades or 2 years or a year or 6 months. Well, we're here to support this club. So getting all those different perspectives from different people, from different cultures, from different backgrounds is what we're here for. So thank you very much, Phil, for choosing out Brighton and Hove Albion, and thank you for joining us tonight, because I know you've been to your first game. I mean, have you been to any soccer games in the A-League? And if you have, how does it compare with Premier League stadium facilities, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, there's certainly no comparison. I suppose one, just a little bit further to that point, you know, as I said, there are going to be those kind of the cynics out there and whatnot. But I've had some rough journeys with other teams that I've supported. The rugby league team that I grew up supporting were kicked out of the NRL in '99, and they've never been brought back. And I just can't stomach supporting any other team. So like there was a place in my heart missing, and at this stage it just feels like Brighton have kind of filled that. And to go there today, to be at my first game, and just picking up a seat on StubHub, like everyone that I touched today, everyone that I engaged with were just lovely people. There was not one bad egg, and it just helps to make for an amazing experience. The atmosphere obviously doesn't compare to the A League down under. I'm not an avid attender of those games, I suppose. There are sort of good and bad atmospheres in the Australian competition as well. And it gets a terrible rap from the Aussie press down there because they're against football, as in soccer in general. So to be a part of today was just it was unreal, and it was excellent vibes all around.
Oh, Phil, I'm really glad to hear that, mate. And it'll be really interesting to get your thoughts as we dissect what happened. And I think, Joe, what better place to start with the starting 11, as we always like to. 9 changes, Joe, from the team that lost in the week to Ajax Athens. In came Bart Verbruggen, Adam Webster, Lewis Dunk, who was a big miss in the week. Dahoud, Welbeck, Adingra, Ferguson, Veltman, and Buonanotte. Really quickly, Joe, let's talk about Lewis Dunk then, because we missed him a lot against Athens, and it was really good to see him back in the side tonight.
Yeah, and the comment on the way home in the car was, "What do we do when Lewis Dunk retires?" I'm genuinely terrified for that. To see what happens there, because it's so clear to see how important he is to us. You miss how vocal he is. Like a lot of people say, he's the quiet leader that sort of goes about his game and just plays it really like follow my lead almost. But actually, like I was watching him a lot today, and Lewis Dunk's sort of the guy that you sort of just don't really watch because you know that you're going to get a solid performance. But my eyes were drawn to him because obviously how much we missed him on Thursday, and my word, he was literally dictating everything in that first half, especially. And he even told the North Stand to shut up at one point. That's how much of a leader Lewis Dunk is, that he can control the crowd. And I love it. And yeah, it's clear to see what we miss when Lewis Dunk isn't on the team sheet. And massive relief to see him back. And luckily, there's no major injury that's going to keep him out for a long period of time. And it seems to me that Lewis Dunk sort of plays through injury. Like at the end of last season, he was playing with a back injury, and sort of missed out on the England role and stuff like that. But I don't know if he's fully fit. But Lewis Dunk just seems to be a warrior. And again, leads by example that, if I've got an ouchie foot, I'm going to play and I'm going to put everything on the line for this football club. And that's exactly what you get.
An ouchie foot might be the single greatest way to talk about an injury that's ever happened. Talking really briefly about injuries, Pascal Gross, unfortunately, saw the news this evening that he will be out until after the October international break, as will James Milner. So that's really disappointing. But Dagan in came Mo Dahoud, and to my eyes, before a ball had even been kicked, a midfield two of Dahoud and Gilmore seemed to be quite an interesting combination. Two very technical players in the midfield. So Dagan, were you excited by what you saw in the starting 11 today, or was there any trepidation with who was the personnel starting today?
Yeah, there was a little trepidation in this particular combination. Other than Ferguson, I thought there was a little sort of physical dominance lacking in the sort of final half of the field, really. We just seemed a little slight, and it looked like Bournemouth felt like they could be pretty physical with Ferguson and not have to feel threatened by a lot of the other players on the pitch. I feel like Ferguson hit the ground more in the first half than is typical for him. Bournemouth was really the aggressor. Speaking of the team sheet, the 9 changes were prominent. And you might figure, hey, we made 6 changes from the Man U game to the Athens game and then 9 changes today. And what I was doing here as I was staring down at my phone and making some notes, if you saw me while Phil was introducing himself, I was curious how many different starters in total there have been across these 3 games. Do you guys care to venture a guess? Little live quiz.
Oh,
How many different starters?
18.
20.
Phil?
Yeah, it's right around that 18 to 20 range. I'll lock in 19. Why not?
22.
22
different starters. I'll give you the full list. Verbruggen, Veltman, Webster, Dunk, Estupinian, Dahoud, Gilmore, Bonanate, Welbeck, Adingra, Ferguson. That's today's group. The additions from Athens, I'll go back to Man U because this is the way I did it. Steele, Van Hecke, Lamptey, Gross, Lallana, Mitoma. Milner, Igor, March, Fati, and Pedro were all from Athens. That's 22 different names. And we will certainly talk about the 23rd player that we've seen in these 3 games, who I would have liked to have seen in the starting lineup today. I think it would have been a very different game from the outset had we had young Carlos Baleba, but we'll talk more about his appearance. But yeah, so I think there are reasons for nervousness, and I think those sort of played out in the first half. I wouldn't put that goal solely on young Bart, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But I was happy that Dunk shushed the North stand. They needed to be quieted, getting on our young keeper for playing the way that his manager wants him to play. And I thought he wasn't getting a lot of help from his team. I know we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, no, all fair comments. 22. You can really tell that we're using the squad with the amount of games that we're going to have to play. Phil, really quickly on the starting 11 then. You said before we came on air that one of your favourite players is Mitoma. He didn't start today. Were you a bit disappointed not to see him in the starting 11?
Yeah, look, I wasn't surprised. I made that comment to a mate that I sort of chat all these kinds of things with when I was at the ground, and we saw that that Fati wasn't starting as well. I mean, obviously they've just played enormous minutes recently, and I felt like it was going to happen. And apologies for the background noise. I'm literally outside the new Unity Hotel trying to catch some NFL on a Sunday night as well. But like with the Mitoma one, one of the main takeaways of my trip to the Amex today was just how much incredible Japanese energy is within this club off the back of what he's been able to produce the last year and whatever. And I went to the store before the game, and the amount of Japanese contingent that were ready to get their brand new jersey with the 22 printed on the back was astonishing. I couldn't believe it. I mean, obviously we've seen the social media pages and whatever, but to see that, and then to see that he wasn't starting, I was like, man, I hope he gets on, because there's going to be a lot of disappointed fans otherwise. And for him to do that, what he did when he came on was just extraordinary. But no, I wasn't surprised. We know it's going to be a sort of a rotation policy as we try and navigate our way through this maiden Europe voyage.
Yeah, definitely. And we certainly will be talking about what he did a little bit. Unfortunately, we do have to talk about the first half, as painful as it may be. All the early possession was with Brighton, as you'd expect, and it certainly seemed like Bournemouth were quite content to let us have the ball. There were no major goalmouth action at either end of the pitch. But before we do talk about, obviously, the goal that Bournemouth did score, Joe, I'd just like to talk about our defending from set pieces. Because there was a few moments in that first half where we looked really quite shaky. And I just wanted to get your opinion on that. Obviously, it was a huge issue in the week against Ajax Athens. But yeah, again, today, there were moments where Bournemouth looked not overly threatening, but there were just free headers to be had. And it's causing some Albion fans, myself included, some concern.
If there's any kids watching, block your ears now. Same shit, different game. Honestly, it's so incredibly frustrating, but it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise because I saw a stat that we are the smallest team on average in the Premier League. Bournemouth have got Philip Billing in their side, who is 6'6". He's literally massive. And they're a pretty big side anyway and quite powerful. So I was worried every time there was a set piece. Luckily, we didn't concede from one. So that's a plus, I have to say. We didn't concede a set piece today, so good. Well done. But look at Thursday night. It was an absolute shambles from set pieces, and clearly you miss the organisation of Lewis Dunk. Nobody knows who they're marking. Mitoma was jogging around the guy that headed it into the net on Thursday. It just seems extremely blasé, and it'll be fine. It's normally fine because Lewis Dunk is there to absolutely thunder bastard it out with his head. But when he's not there, it's just an absolute shambles. And the ball's pinging about, deflecting everywhere, and somehow finds its way in for Athens' second goal. I know we're not talking about the Athens game here, but that's the takeaway I have from the set pieces. Is just that we get completely overhauled physically, and we've got no answer to it really, unless our goalkeeper claims it or Lewis Dunk heads it out, or we luckily get a clearance away. It's a really big problem for us, and I'm not 100% sure what the set piece coach is teaching them or doing midweek, but something has to be addressed because it's a massive issue. Especially, the high level of football we're playing. There's going to be corners, there's going to be free kicks, there's going to be so much threat around our box, and teams will just know that lump it into the box, you'll most likely get a goal against Brighton. So it absolutely has to be addressed.
Was it last year? I think we were the worst team at defending set pieces. I think that was a stat from last year. Alfie in the comments says, I get shook every time a corner comes in. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Alfie. Thank you for joining us live, everyone. If you do have any comments you'd like to drop them down in the comments and we'll talk about them. Some of them talking about Dunkey, here about how he was immense. And it was good to see him shushing the North after the mistake from Verbruggen, which we'll get to very shortly. And here's an interesting one from Pozzy Poz. Love that. Dagan, I personally don't think we should play both Welbeck and Ferguson at the same time. I'm inclined to agree. I mean, Ferguson, for me, looked really off the boil today. His hold-up play was almost non-existent at times. And there's a few times I think Roberto De Zerbi was getting quite frustrated that Ferguson, instead of receiving the ball, holding it up and then playing other players in, he was almost trying to turn before the ball got to him. What did you make of Ferguson and Welbeck up top together?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the same thing. I thought we were trying to turn upfield almost before we had fully possessed the ball, and Bournemouth was really, really content to play behind us and just kind of poke, kick, create disruption. And to their credit, I think they got their feet on the ball some, and other times they were just play on moments. I feel like we had some of those too. I think the official, and I didn't take notes on who was officiating the game today, but I thought he'd sort of let them play on a lot of those balls, especially in the midfield. And their physicality, I think, gave them a little bit of an advantage there. And I think, we weren't creating the kind of space with Ferguson and Welbeck being the two guys who were dropping deeper than we might with a Fati or a João Pedro, right? A little bit more quickness.
I'm going to interject there really quickly. I hope you don't mind. Do you think that wasn't helped by the fact that on the wings, normally you'd have March and Mitoma who can use their pace? Today, we know Adingra's got pace, but Buonanotte, as we've said on this podcast before, not really a winger, doesn't have the pace to, to create that space down the flanks.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think it helps. I didn't sense that those guys were being ignored, by the defense, but I don't think either of them has risen to be the level of threat for the defense that the aforementioned Mitoma and March are, and just familiarity, timing, dropping. Sometimes one of them will drop further back and not both race up the pitch to receive. I will say I didn't have my eye on those two as keenly, and just perhaps because our guys weren't even able to make that initial turn or play the ball back before being dispossessed. It felt like so often. But yeah, I wouldn't say I always dislike the pairing of Ferguson and Welbeck. I think with the physicality that Bournemouth brought this game, it didn't work well because we weren't able to use them in tandem going forward. And I think Welbeck does play well with Ferguson at times because Ferguson is able to finish in a way that Welbeck sometimes isn't. And Welbeck does a nice job, running and moving in space. He's not always the clinical finisher and able to get the ball on his feet as quickly. This is not the first time I've made that point. But I think in tandem, they can be okay. I think today, Bournemouth style of play created some problems, and I'm happy that we made adjustments and quickly. To me, that's what really stands out about these changes as they were at the half.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Thank you for your comments, guys. We're going to come on to a few of them about the goalkeeper in just a moment. Phil, I'm going to come to you on this one. Let's talk about the goal, Phil, the Bournemouth goal. It was a moment of, some people would say it was a howler from the goalkeeper. Others will point to the complete lack of movement ahead of Bart Verbruggen. Either way, Bournemouth took the lead. It was Christie who came in, I think perhaps even unsighted, who dispossessed Verbruggen. Solanke then chips into an empty net. A really frustrating way to go behind, Phil.
Yeah, for sure. And you could feel the nerves and the tension at the Amex for sure. But, I suppose to extend from what we've been speaking about as well is like we kind of know that those two things are going to be things that this team are going to have to weather throughout the season as more teams figure out how we're trying to play, of course, and the way that Bournemouth just held off. They weren't getting sucked into any of that stuff at the back and the physicality as well. We saw that on Thursday night as well against Athens as well. We have to remember we're an incredibly talented team, but we're young, and generally that means the opponent is going to come with this level of physicality, and that's just something that we're going to have to continue to deal with. With the case of Verbruggen today, it was from where I was sitting, I was east lower. I thought for my first Premier League game I may as well fork out for a padded seat. So I wasn't in the the section where a lot of the noise was coming from, but most of the sentiment that I was listening to around me was frustration more towards the lack of movement further up the ground. The fact that Verbruggen didn't have a lot to play to. I think we saw, and again, moving forward, I suppose, but we saw Dunk start to sort of take that initiative, feel what the game was offering and what the fans wanted. We kind of got that eventually, but yeah, I mean, it just felt like something like that. It felt like that's how the deadlock was going to be broken. Like it just had that feeling about it. And, unfortunately it happened, and it's a moment that Verbruggen is going to learn from. And I think he knows that. I'm sure that's what the coaches said to him straight after it happened and reiterated at halftime. This is a young man. Obviously, at the end of the day, you just need to fill him with confidence, tell him that making a mistake isn't the end of the world. And obviously that's what we were able to do. We were able to rally, but yeah, it was one of those moments where you could just feel like something like that was brewing.
Yeah, and I think it is worth remembering that this is the style of football that Roberto De Zerbi wants to play. And if anything, it's a miracle that more of these mistakes haven't happened. So, Joe, a few people in the comments here have said about changing goalkeepers. I mean, Roberto De Zerbi has been really open and honest and said that this season he has two number ones. He's going to rotate them. A few people suggesting then that rotating goalkeepers could hinder understanding between the goalkeepers and the defense. And a few people just mentioning about rotation as well. We know it's going to be important going forward because of the amount of competitions that we're in. What do you think about the downsides then of rotation? Can it reduce the understanding between players if they're not playing together? Because I think that was probably one of the biggest issues on Thursday, the fact that we had a back line that had never played together.
The goalkeeper's not the issue. The issue today was we were completely stationary. That was the problem. And the issue was obviously Verbruggen's made the decision a little bit too late as to what he's going to do with the ball. And Bournemouth take the chance and come on rushing onto him, put the pressure on him, and get their rewards for doing what they were doing for half an hour. And it really frustrates me that people instantly blame the goalkeeper for that, because it's a whole team thing. For me as well, just thinking about the two goalkeepers rotating with how much football we're playing, the way that Roberto De Zerbi wants his goalkeepers to play football, mentally, it's as exhausting as it is for a midfielder. And that pressure, if you want Verbruggen to start every game, that mental pressure will be too much for him, because there's a lot on the goalkeepers to get our attacks moving. So having these two goalkeepers who are both absolutely fantastic with the ball at their feet, I don't care what anyone says about today, they are both very, very, very capable goalkeepers. So it's not a problem for me, and I hope De Zerbi carries on. I know Dagan's got a lot more to say on this one, so I'll pass it to Dagan in a sec. But yeah, De Zerbi, carry on doing what you're doing, because it works. No matter what anyone says, it works.
Dagan, just before you jump in, I just want to draw your attention to a comment that was made by Christian in the chat here. A line in the Telegraph article this weekend about how rotating keepers as much as we have hasn't been done often before, but might become the norm if we can make it successful. Dagan, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I agree with Christian. I said it as in some different words prior to that, right? Nothing is ever the way it's done until it's done and done successfully, and then people change. I don't know if you guys heard on the broadcast, but immediately after the goal was conceded, there was a 5-minute discussion between the pundits about this just isn't what's done, and it just isn't going to work. And right, I mean, I just think every pundit is waiting for the Brighton experiment to fail in somewhere or another so they can chime in on, nope, see, just not going to work. Up, small club. Nope, so you can't do this different thing. You can't play out from the back like that. It's too risky. Like, it's just, and they wait until the moment where it doesn't work. But like, folks, I want to remind you, we're in third. We're in third. Things have gone wrong, and we're in third. This is not the perfect script. This is not all gone according to plan, but we're in third. And yeah, I get incensed by the punditry that after the fact will critique, something so they can be right. There's no risk in that. Oh, see, this just doesn't work. Well, how did it go the rest of the game? It worked okay. We won 3-1. We're conceding, but we're scoring more than the other team, and that's the goal of the system and why I think should trust our manager. Yeah, it was a mistake. It was a bad mistake, but I think both these guys are quality. Verbruggen is the future of the goalkeeping spot. Unless Rushworth evolves or De Zerbi leaves, and then Rushworth style becomes sort of the style of play that we prefer. But as it stands right now, Verbruggen is the future. Steele has earned the right to be a keeper in the present. And his remarks, I think we talked about them last time we were here. That De Zerbi changed his life and that he'll do whatever he asked him to do, I think says the dressing room is in good shape. if anybody watched the Chelsea match today, Sanchez was having just a worldie of a performance until a ball scooted through his feet that shouldn't have. The reality is, it's a tough position. There's a ton of pressure. I think having two guys to absorb that pressure and the sense of competition that comes from it is maybe a little bit of a positive, right? Even if they both know they have a chance, there's some implied reason to be additionally focused. And I know goalkeepers are a different breed. I understand that, but I don't think it's reasonable to say, well, it's just not what teams, do. Arsenal's in the same situation right now, hearing the same kind of criticism, and we'll see. We'll see if it works. Maybe it won't. Maybe we'll both fail and, be relegated this year, but I doubt it.
I do think you're right. I think there's definitely a sense of we're just waiting for it not to work. As I say, I think people have just got to get on board with this. This is the way Brighton play football. And sometimes when you're watching it in the flesh, it can be very sort of get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it. But we're not going to. So
can I have my say on the people that are still saying get rid of it at the Amex?
Of course you can, Joseph.
Have they not seen what we've achieved under Roberto Zerbi playing this style of football? Have they not seen some of the passages of play that have come from the goalkeeper all the way up to attack, and we score the most beautiful team goal? How on earth, after 1 year, are you not trusting the process? Are you not just bearing with the team? Stop putting on completely unnecessary pressure on them to get the ball up the field, because we will get the ball up the field and we will score goals. I don't know if people watched our previous podcast, but we've said some insane goal scoring stats over the last year.
Goals. I joke, of course we have. We've scored many goals.
Manipulated stat, Tom. Manipulated stat.
You know me, Joe. I love to manipulate. I'm not like Dagan. I manipulate my stats all the time.
But honestly, trust the process. What proof is there for you not to trust the way that we play football? There is zero proof of that.
And just jumping in as well, I'm sure most of you guys caught, but just so everyone knows as well, what Andy Naylor tweeted out just before. This is the first team outside the Big Six to win 5 of their first 6 games since Charlton 05-06. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. And to add to that as well, sort of to bring in my sort of American football fandom as well. It's all about how you make those in-game adjustments. And from what I've seen in the year and whatever of Brighton is, or since De Zerbi took over as well, he's one of the best managers at making the necessary adjustments, whether it's at halftime or whether it's in that first half, even at a down moment, when he can pull the players over to the sideline. And we saw it at Old Trafford last weekend, particularly with just that minor tweak that they had to make. I have that belief that even though a first half went poorly, De Zerbi's going to be able to make those adjustments on the fly.
Yeah, he's a very tactically astute manager, and we'll talk, obviously, of course, about the changes he did make and how important they were in changing the tide of the game. Just great comments, guys. There's some really fantastic conversations happening, and that's exactly what we want. Lexi says, I think the get rid of it mentality comes from a place of us growing up in the 80s, 90s, early noughties of English hoofball. Yeah, long ball, get rid of it. Don't get me wrong, there's a time to, kick it into Rosette. You could argue that Adam Webster should have done that against West Ham a couple of times. But as Joe says, it works more often than it doesn't. The first half rounded out quite nicely in the end. And, Brighton certainly got their get out of jail free card. And it was a very fortuitous moment there as Billy Gilmore's cross is deflected after a scramble in the box after a corner. Phil, I'm going to come to you on this one again because it was your first Brighton goal at the Amex, albeit an own goal. What did you make of it, and what was the emotions as Brighton drew level?
I mean, it sort of caught everyone there by surprise. I believe, from memory, I haven't had a chance to go back and rewatch the game, but I believe it was just after the announcement came over that there was going to be 3 additional minutes at 45, And you know, I suppose maybe personally I had this feeling of, well, maybe we can just try and get this thing back to 1-1, but it was only at that very back end of that first half where it even looked like we were penetrating, you know, and there was barely I don't even know if there was a proper shot on target in that first period, but it just kind of felt like it was getting to that point where it was like, maybe just start putting the ball in the box and let's just see what happens. Sometimes that's just what you need to do. And I don't know, it just felt like one of those moments. And as I think I think you sort of articulated it pretty well. It was a get out of jail free card for sure.
Yeah, and it was my boy Billy Clifford Gilmore who helps get it. As listeners and viewers of the show will know, I'm a big fan of Billy Gilmore. It's a lovely ball into the box, and thank you, Bournemouth, for helping us there. I think there was one shot on target, Phil, in that first half, but I would call it more of a pass myself. It was Buonanotte who basically passed the ball to their keeper. It was
why are we not counting
shot.
this as Billy Gilmore's goal? It was on target, no? Come on, Premier League, sort it out.
Yeah, give Billy G his first Brighton goal, please, for me.
Joe's got Billy in fantasy, obviously.
Yep.
And who'd blame him? He's a fantastic little player who's getting even better. I think it's fair to say that first half was pretty lackluster, and many of us were calling for changes at half time. And boy, Joe, did we get those changes. Buonanotte and Ferguson coming off, and Fati and Mitoma coming on. It took 17 seconds from the restart, which Bournemouth took, for those two players to stamp their authority on the game. Fati immediately went to close down the Bournemouth player. A loose ball. Mitoma and Fati, some lovely link-up play between them. And then Mitoma, in the box, scores, puts Brighton 2-1 up. I imagine quite a lot of fans missed that. Cam, our very own Cam, member of the podcast, we know she missed it because she was still having a drink in the concourse. But Joe, I hope you were in your seat for that moment.
I was in my seat and I was enjoying it very much. First of all, before I talk about the goal, I would pay very good money to know what Roberto Zerbi told Kaoru Mitoma and Ansu Fati. They were out warming up, which Curtis pointed out, and I said Curtis was wrong, but Curtis was right. Mitoma and Fati were warming up during halftime in their kits, getting ready to come on. And what an introduction. Just unbelievable. As soon as I see Fati close that ball down, Mitoma with the, what he does so well when he's on that halfway line, he picks up a loose ball. The Bournemouth defenders are thinking, shit, we've got Kaoru Mitoma running at us now. And by the time they've thought about that, Kaoru Mitoma's in the box creating something, and he creates a lovely little pass from Fati and a flick from Dahoud. Puts Mitoma in, and as you say, 17 seconds. A lot of people still coming back to their seats, falling downstairs, celebrating the goal. It was absolute carnage, and what a turnaround from going in at halftime 1-1, and then 17 seconds after the break, the game's completely turned around, and after that, it was a completely different game of football. I said to my dad, like, never has the phrase a game of two halves been so apparent, which is what it was at the Amex. And it was very important for us to start quickly and strong, and with a little bit more belief in what we know we can do so well, and to get a goal after 17 seconds. I mean, you're onto a winner, aren't you?
Yeah, it just took the wind out of Bournemouth sails. And there's some guy in the chat calling himself the El Dude Brothers, who is saying that Curtis is handsome and a top geezer. Thank you, the El Dude Brothers.
Never heard of him. Get him out.
And talking of believers, well, we won't. We'll get to him in a minute. But I think Dagan, we wanted a response. We got a response, and it was Kaoru Mitoma, who's looked quite tired recently. I would say, who really sort of got us back into a place where the Brighton faithful could believe. I've done it again, and Ansu Fati as well. Really important for those goals. Just what a way to start that second half.
Yeah, impact subs, right? I mean, it just, I think there's a different mentality when you come on and the job to do is to go 100 miles an hour and change the game, right? When you're starter, you sort of are imagining, especially in Mitoma's case, he typically plays, if not the full 90, close, right? Maybe he comes off in the 75th, 80th minute plus. So he's got to keep something in the tank. In this instance, even if he was a little bit fatigued after, what's been a tough schedule and a demanding international break for him too, I think just all right, my job is to come in and make an impact. And Ansu Fati, I think, again, Zerbi saying, I don't want to put a lot of pressure on himself. I just want him to have fun. And it just seems like there's a stay the course, we're okay, keep doing what we're doing kind of mentality that is stabilizing. And as you watch a lot of these teams seem rudderless, seem to just inexplicably play, awful ball for, a stretch. And you wonder what's going on. What's the atmosphere in the team like? Even when things are at their worst for us, it seems like there's a ton of belief and a ton of excitement. These guys seem to like playing with each other. And to be in a squad that's used 23 different players in a week, right? And for that to still be the case, there's got to be something really positive that's happening. And again, the charisma of leadership, right? When you bring someone who's both, sort of a tactical genius who has this sort of just charisma and sort of innate, like he's the guyness of Zerbi. I just imagine these guys coming in with their hair on fire, ready to go. Right. I know this is a question about Mitoma and how he started in Ansu Fati, but I think it's just where this team is right now. We're going to see performances like this when we're not at our best. I felt the same way. I think I said in the chat before Zerbi even spoke, I said unlucky and not good enough about Thursday. And those goals, I mean, they were unlucky. Mitoma didn't mark up. Right. He just missed the guy. But that header is a 1 in 10,000 header, if that, right? He was open, but how many players would hit that header that well? And even the same player, how many times would he hit that header that well? It's rare. And then the second ball, like Van Hecke should have gotten his foot on it. Julio should have rotated over to be in the way. And I think Dunk probably would have been to get in front of the guy who eventually touched it in. Like, those were kind of fluky goals. And I think instead of the wheel, we collapsed. It was a horrible calamity. We lost this game. We're fine. We're going to show up and we're going to win again. An unlucky, stupid goal in the beginning of the game today, again. And it was a mistake rather than bad luck. But yeah, we're just staying the course and these guys are ready. And it seems replicable. And that's what I'm excited about. I felt that way coming into the season. I feel more so now. We're going into a really tough patch of the schedule. I don't know how much we're going to talk about that, but we're going to find out whether it's real or, whether we're a middle of that top 10 versus around the top of that top 10 over the next couple of weeks.
Certainly an interesting conversation to be had. I mean, Phil, the energy in the second half was just polar opposite to the first half. It was pretty much like everything that had been missing from the first half, we were suddenly starting to see in the second half. I mean, Brighton were really putting all the pressure on. We had a lot more chances in that second half. Dunk headed wide. Fati had a great opportunity to score, but skewed horribly wide with his left foot. What did you make of this, the change in energy levels?
Yeah, I think obviously we're incredibly fortunate to take momentum into the half with the own goal. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened. And as you guys have kind of alluded to as well, like that the first goal, like that pass from Fati, like how many players are thinking about that pass? Like I don't know. And obviously the class of Mitoma, it was just an incredible finish. But do those players kind of play with that confidence? I know with Fati there's like a youthful exuberance, but if it's 1-0 down, are they thinking about that? I don't know. Maybe it's you're just looking at a completely different ball game when we come out of the half. But yeah, that the 1-1, like that goal just before the end of the first half, it was definitely a nerve settler because surely it was the worst 45 minutes of the season. Maybe West Ham is in the chat as well, one of those halves, but it was just, yeah, the energy flipped so quickly, and the seating around me changed as well. A couple of guys came in at halftime that weren't there in the first half, and so I ended up getting moved up one seat to the left, which wasn't a problem. All of a sudden, I ended up with two sort of fairly large gentlemen either side, and all of a sudden we score, and it was just pandemonium around me. I was high-fiving people that I've met 5 seconds ago, and everything changed. That's the reality. Everything changed, and I think that's why so many people have latched onto Mitoma, because he just gives you this energy which is really hard to replicate in football.
Yeah, it certainly is. And whenever he's on the pitch, you just believe something can happen. And I think Ansu Fati is a bit like that as well. He's got this. There's something about Ansu Fati, his touch, his vision. You just, when he's on the pitch, you believe that he can create something.
He's one of my he's played what 150 minutes worth of football for our football club, and I absolutely bloody adore him. Like, he's not done that much, and people will be like, "Why? What has he done?" But my God, the aura that kid brings to this team, and the fear he instilled. Like, he was running at Bournemouth players left, right, and centre when he came on, and they were just backing off. And he was creating so much. Like, his eye for a pass, as you say, Phil, was just ridiculous. And his creativity, it is Barcelona oozing out of him. He is so class, and we are so lucky to have a footballer like him. And a lot of people will be like, "Oh, he should have taken his chance better today. He'll get more chances. He will put them away." This kid is going to really help us this season, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, and it's just really exciting, very dynamic type of player. And we'll talk about some more dynamism coming on to the pitch. We saw João Pedro come on in the second half as well, adds another dimension. And the man that a lot of you have been talking about in the chats, Balebing. Balebing came on, and to say he only had a 20-minute-ish cameo, Dagan, he was very, very impressive. Real ball winner, looked strong, looked quick over 5 yards, and was instrumental in the third goal. He drove the team forward, very Basuma-esque in that regard. He lost the ball. He immediately won it back. Billy Gilmore then told Purvis where to go, as in go that way, gives the ball to Purvis. Purvis puts in a beautiful cross, and Mitoma leaps like a salmon to head in the ball. But that all starts with Balebing. It all starts with him driving the team forward. How impressive was that young man in his cameo today?
It's a heck of a debut. It was a heck of a debut. 13 touches, 8 for 8 passing, 4 ground duels won, 4 tackles won in 16 minutes. That's a guy who's, again, making an impact. The fair question is he ready to do that, for a whole game? Is he ready to be our go-to starter? I think we're going to maybe find out how ready he is with Pascal Gross maybe being out for a stretch, because I don't know that we're going to see, an everyday combo of Dahoud and Gilmore, especially given the first half results today. Now, those guys were there when we turned the game around, so they certainly didn't, lose us the game by any stretch. But Balebing, if there were questions about his readiness, I think answered those in a big way by looking absolutely ready. And frankly, he looked like what we saw on tape. He's not Caicedo. In fact, I think he's more of a live wire physically. He's, I think, bigger than Caicedo. And I think he's better on the ball than Caicedo already. So, I don't know that he is the incredible tackler on the chase that Caicedo just seemed to have an incredible knack for. time will tell on that. But that's a pretty specific skill. But I think as a total player, I think the upside for Baleba is arguably even higher than Caicedo, which is a staggering thing to say for a guy who we just sold for $115 million. But I think Caicedo very much is who he is as a player, and that he fits a very important role and checks a very specific box. But I think if you don't have the right pieces around him, the checking of that box is less important. And I think it's something we're seeing with Chelsea right now. I know he's injured and having maybe a tougher time finding his way in the team. But Baleba, I think, could bring more to the table than just being a ball winner. And that's the really exciting part. But certainly that part can't be overlooked either.
No, it certainly can't. I think it's certainly something we've missed. As good as Pascal Gross, as good as Billy Gilmore, and as good as Mo Dahoud are, I think you can't really convince me that they are natural ball-winning midfielders. They aren't sixes, as you'd say. So it's good to see someone who can fill in that role. And a lot of people in the comments, singing his praises. Alfie saying he's built like a certain type of brick shithouse. And Matty here saying that he should start on Wednesday. Phil, Brighton play Chelsea on Wednesday. Do you think, as it's a cup game, it's an opportunity to see what Baleba can do from the off?
Yeah, I'd be shocked if he wasn't starting on Wednesday, to be honest. After the cameo we saw, as I said, it kind of just leads perfectly into this game as well. And he cut an imposing figure out there as well. The energy that he brought as well. As I sort of mentioned before, this is a young team which is going to be challenged physically a lot. And he looked up to that side of it because of the size of him, his willingness to go after the game as well. He came on as obviously a midfielder, but as a scooter goes past, but he was willing to go up and provide that pressure at the front line. When we were trying to win the ball back, and he just looked hungry. He looked incredibly hungry. Now we just have to see whether that can translate to a longer game. And I think we're going to get the opportunity to see what that maybe looks like from the outset on Wednesday.
Interesting. And Alfie's just put in the comments that he would like Cam Pupignon, one of your countrymen, Phil, to start on Wednesday, as well as our own Jack Hinchelwood. That would be quite some team. And I'd love to see the Baleba Caicedo battle in the middle. That'd be a battle for the ages. But no, very interesting.
I'd love a bit of Cam action for sure.
Yeah, do it for Phil, Roberto. Go on, do it for our Phil. I suppose, one of the main things we need to talk about then, Joe, as the game went on, was a fantastic goal line clearance from our very own Lewis Dunk. We've already alluded to the fact that having him back was such a big moment. But I also need to give a nod for Bart Verbruggen there, who made a really good save, but then followed up, as I say, by a fantastic goal line clearance by Lewis Dunk. Captain Fantastic, doing what he does best.
Yes, the chat just pointing out that Cam Pupillon is out on loan, so we won't see him start on Wednesday. Sorry, guys. Yes, blocking shots, scoring goals. Dunk is for sure one of our own, doing what he does best. The intelligence of Lewis Dunk is ridiculous. To know where the danger is going to come, to read the game so incredibly quickly and get behind Bart Verbruggen. Bart, should really claim it. I looked at the highlights on the way back, and it sort of looked as if Bart Verbruggen sort of like couldn't quite reach the ball, and suddenly there is Lewis Dunk. I couldn't see a thing because it was like down the other end of the pitch. So all I saw was a massive goalmouth scramble. Was hoping the net didn't bulge. And then the Bournemouth fans go up in raptures. Luckily, I see the ball flying out and it's all good. But yeah, again, Lewis Dunk proving how extremely important he is to us, and saving our bacon, because I think Bournemouth would have gained a little bit of momentum and put on a push to equalise.
Yeah, it was, as I said, Captain Fantastic at his best, doing what he does. And by doing so, it meant that Brighton saw out another 3-1 victory, which, with results elsewhere going the way they did, Brighton went up to third in the table And as Phil's already pointed out, 3 consecutive wins in the Premier League, which means we've got 5 out of 6. And that's the first non-Big Six club to do that since 2005, 2006, which I think was Charlton Athletic. I found De Zerbi's post-match comments, Dagan, very interesting. He said to the press, "I'm happy because you are happy for the result. But today we played one of the worst games of my time here. 2, 3, or 4 times we were very lucky. The man has standards, and today those standards were not met even with a win." What do you make of those comments from the gaffer?
A longtime coach myself, I always found that players were more receptive to or received difficult feedback after a win more readily than after a loss. And so I imagine he's saving a little of his consternation over Thursday's results to throw it today. I don't know that today was really one of the worst. I think in combination, right, the two maybe felt that way. But it's easier to point at this first half. And I mean, in terms of energy and being threatening, which he prioritizes, maybe it was one of the worst few, because we did look a little lifeless, and to Phil's point, didn't really have any meaningful chances that seemed threatening up until the own goal, where Gilmore, to his credit, did play a nice ball in, but we were fortunate at the very least. You guys know I love De Zerbi. I think he pushes mostly the right buttons. I don't always think he gets the lineup decisions wrong, but that's me being the person after the fact. Though I will say often I've expressed my displeasure before before things happen. Milner starting at right back being among those things that I just hope I never have to see again, but fear that we will. I love Milner as a sub. He's a great impact sub when we've got a lead and we've got to salt away a game, but terrifies me when he's a starter. But no, I love our manager. I love those comments. I think he is pushing this club to play its very best every time out, and less than perfection is okay, but he's still chasing perfection, and that's a beautiful thing. And perfecting those small details, it's where greatness lies.
It's one thing that seems to have worked for his time as the manager so far as well. It's been one of his sort of early defining moments is the fact that he's never satisfied. And Dagan, you can probably speak to this, but that can work 2 ways, and so far it seems as though the players have been super receptive to that, which is awesome.
Yeah, I imagine Pep Guardiola is somewhat similar as well.
Phil, I've spoken to this very thing, and I think a lot of coaches that are this demanding, they sort of embody this sort of tough love, right, with their players. They're sort of all the time. I think that gets old really fast. But I think what you see from De Zerbi, the way he loves on his players, there is a genuine affection, and that level of being demanding comes with a huge belief in each of these players, right? He's not upset about their deficiencies. In fact, he's the opposite. He's disappointed by them not reaching their massive potential. And I think how he frames it, makes a world of difference. And I think frankly, what separates him from a lot of other, tactically strong managers that maybe struggle in their people skills. And if you don't like him, he's just going to tell you to hit the road. And that, I think, is, he sort of made it known that's how it's going to be. And so if you can't take the kind of pushing that he's going to give, you got to find another club, which I'm okay with. I never had that luxury as a high school coach, though.
Curtis pointed out that De Zerbi is a mentality messiah, and what you guys have been saying is absolutely spot on. And what I said midweek, I spoke to Radio 5 Live again after Thursday's result, and I said, what's great about De Zerbi is if he gets taught a lesson, he gets it across to his players unbelievably quickly. So just to add to your point, Dagan, I think that's 100% true. And the response that we saw after the halftime chat, whatever that must have been, I would love to be a fly on the wall in that dressing room. But yeah, he got the response and he taught them the lessons very quickly.
He did, and it brings to mind a quote from Sun Tzu in The Art of War about regarding your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look upon them as your own beloved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death. I mean, we're not talking about death here, but we are talking
I'm
about.
going to clip that. That was a beautiful quote.
I mean, it just recalls that because it, as you say, Dagan, it's about putting your arm around them. And he said it before about Caicedo in January last season. He said about, I look upon these players as my sons, and I am like that father figure. I want to be like that father figure to them. So it just recalls that lovely quote there. And I think if you can push people like that, they will walk on hot coals for you, as it were.
It's a love and respect that he seems to have at an individual level, like in terms of his relationships with his players. And that helps, obviously, to get the best out of his group. And this is probably a point that I'd thought about raising the other day when I was thinking about this, is that, like, I think we sort of overlook so much in professional sport, particularly sport where there's just so much money involved, that those relationships matter more than it gets credit for. And, you know, you look at a situation like Caicedo in the January window last year, where the club, because of their reputation and what's happening within those walls, they were able to throw their arms around Caicedo and get him back in to play good football, you know, for the home stretch of the season, and then figure something out. And it sets a tone that the club has the players back. And, you know, even though not everything might be going right for you individually, the club will help you to get to where you need to get to. You know, that happens on the selling basis as well, the way that the club has been known to, you know, to increase the value of its playing group. And that doesn't happen overnight. And that's something which Zerbi has just taken this club to another level through, is just those relationships and making the players feel like that they're not just a price tag, but they're humans as well, because at the end of the day, they are.
Really well put, Phil. Really, really, really well put. Talking of those players then, let's talk about our player of the match. Joe, at the ground, they gave it to Billy Gilmore, which made me very happy. Which says a hell of a lot considering Mitoma came on and scored a brace. But Joe Sayers, if you had to give the man of the match award, who would you give it to? And
Why have I been full name there? Am I in trouble?
Joseph Escobar Filipino Sayers III.
That is my full name. That is. So if you want to apply for anything in my name, use that one. My man of the match is Kaoru Mitoma. I think just the sheer fact that he scores 2 goals and completely changes the game, and the fact that he's in the title, and we're going to get lots of views from it. Thank you. It's got to go to Kaoru Mitoma.
All about them views. Dagan, same question to you, my friend. Who was your player of the match?
You know, I don't always go for the goal scorer, but we needed it, and Mitoma rose to the occasion. Ansu Fati gets an honorable mention from me because I thought he was sparkling as well, and I think, you know, his unselfishness with that first goal for Mitoma in the second half was noticeable. Purvis played a great cross on the second one, but ultimately, you know, we've just seen so many times over the past year plus where the finish has been there and it hasn't been converted. And we didn't have a ton of chances, but we made the most of the ones we had, and that's on Mitoma.
Fair's fair. Phil, finally for you, which player stood out the most?
Yeah, I loved the Billy Gilmore shout, because, you know, seeing him for the first time, obviously seeing all these guys for the first time, but just the ferociousness in which he ran for the entire time that he was out there was just something to behold, something that you don't appreciate until you see it there in person. That said, I don't think we're going past Mitoma for this one. The impact of that second half was just enormous, and we've been one of the more clinical teams in front of goal this season, I believe, and that rang true today as well. And he was just unbelievably quality up top, and that's all that counted in the end.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the Billy Gilmore Official man of the match made me very happy. Big fan of Billy Gilmore. Obviously, changed the game through his cross that led to the own goal. Played his own part in the third goal, telling Purvis exactly where he wanted him to run for that ball. But as you all say, goals change games, and Mitoma came onto that pitch and he changed that game. So yeah, for me, also has to be Mitoma.
Another clean sweep.
Another
How
clean
many
sweep.
clean sweeps have we had this season for
I
man
think
of the
that's
match?
the second one.
That's
I think.
mad. Well
No,
done, Kaoru Mitoma. I'm sure you're so proud and will hold this award higher than your Goal of the Month award in the Premier League.
Yeah. The official Albion Obsessed clean sweep of award is in the post to you as we speak.
Can we have a section on the Albies at the end of the season for best clean sweep award?
I'm sure we can. So let's end the show then. I'm sorry, microphone issue there. Let's end the show, gentlemen, by talking about the Wednesday game. We are playing Chelsea, who we don't like very much. They're not having a great season. Hooray. But we play them in the cup on Wednesday. For them, it's going to be a huge game. They're going up against the team that are third in the Premier League, whilst they've got 5 points. So for them, a huge game. So Joe, what do you think is going to happen? We're going to see more rotation, surely. But what do you think is going to happen? I mean, Chelsea can't score for Toffee, but Brighton also can't keep a clean sheet for Toffee. So which way do you think it's going to go, mate?
It's going to be 4-4. No, I'm joking. I'm excited for the Chelsea fans. A big World Cup final coming up. It's going to be something really to hold on to for them if they beat us in the Energy Drink Cup. So just getting that out there before they claim that they're much better than us because they've beaten a third team of Brighton and Hove Albion. I think. Why is your seagull flying? Sorry, I'm just distracted.
I think
Tom,
if you're referring to this one, it's because this is on an old 2006 training jumper.
Oh, there you go.
Which is the same seagull as that one there. And it's got
There you
blue bill on the back.
There you go, Jason. There's your fun Tom fact of the day. Chelsea are an irrelevant, tiny little football club. And they are absolutely hilarious to watch, and I can't wait for us to absolutely smash them. 3-0 to the Albion. Thank you very much.
Dagan, same question to you.
It's going to be interesting. I'm curious. I still don't know if I have a definitive answer on whether the match suspensions affect cup matches, domestic cup matches, in addition to Premier League matches, and whether that means Jackson will miss, Malo Gusto will miss because of their collective suspensions and or cards, or if it's different. Because Gusto got a straight red today, but Jackson accumulated his 5th total yellow today, and so I don't know if that will sit him out of his next Premier League game or whether that will sit him out of the cup match.
So I mean, he's got a yellow card in every game so far.
Really, that's impressive.
That is unbelievable.
Most of them for dissent. Yeah, he's had a rough go of that. So one of these teams has 15 points from 6 games. The other has 5 points from 6 games. I did want to point out, and I'm going to point out that Brighton sits not only third and just 3 points back of first and 1 point back of second, but we sit 6 points clear of 8th. And I want to keep watching that line this year. Last year, we talked about we never dropped below 9th at any point during the season. So it'll be interesting to see where our low point is this year. May we not drop further than we are now, but it's going to be a daunting couple of weeks. A prediction. I'll be interested to see what kind of lineup we put out, but I'm going to say a 1-2 win for the Albion.
Fair is fair. I think a lot of it will come down to that rotation, who we start, how many of the kids we start. But as Christian points out, they could knock us out and we'd still be in the hunt for more trophies than them this season. So that's nice. And finally, Phil, predictions ahead of the game against Chelsea, please. How do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, I suppose we're just going to have to wait and see how seriously we take it, just with the lineup and obviously just the fact that we're juggling so much this season, and it is uncharted waters. So, you know, how seriously do we take it? And it's interesting that, you know, I'm hearing from a couple of the long time Brighton fans here that, you know, that it's all optimism. There's no cynicism here. There's no hoping for the best but expecting the worst. It's just 3-0 blitz in the, you know, against Chelsea midweek, and you know, I'm loving that. I'm loving that because that's not my experience of Brighton. It's been largely positive so far. So like, I suppose I'm feeling just a little bit more skeptical about the whole situation because uncharted waters, as I said, we're still figuring out just the mountains that we have to climb this season from a quantity standpoint. And that's where I'm just feeling like maybe they are just going to play some of the kids and see what happens. That said, I think we can grind something out. So I don't mind a 2-1 result either, because clearly we don't know how to keep a clean sheet.
No, but you make an excellent point there, Phil, because as you say, we've never been in this situation where we're playing 4 competitions at the same time. So it'll be really, really interesting to see who's on the pitch, who's on the bench in the week, because we could see a lot of rotation. There's a lot of games coming thick and fast. We play Man City, Liverpool in the next couple of weeks as well, Ajax. So some really massive, massive games against some massive, massive opposition. You know, so when we go to these small teams, you know, in London, you know, we've got to sort of, you know, make sure that we don't, you know, overdo it. But,
I was led to believe that our tough run happened or started a few weeks ago, though. You know, Newcastle and Old Trafford, but I don't know. Haven't seen it yet.
No, exactly. And I think, you know, we saw today that the teams that play certain ways that are normally down the bottom end of the table, we often cause us more problems than the teams at the top. That's not to say that Man City can be taken lightly. It's not to say that Liverpool can't be taken lightly. But with the way they just play as teams, there's always opportunities for us to weave our magic. And that leads us very nicely to the end of the show. Thank you to Joe, Dagan and Phil. Phil, thank you so much for standing there with your phone for as long as you have. Absolute top bloke. Phil, where can people find you on social media and drop you a follow from the Brighton community?
Yeah, look, it was an absolute buzz. Now that you've given me this opportunity, I'm going to continue to tweet more and more things Brighton to all the Australians that follow me that don't care one iota. That's fine. Yeah, Phil_Pryor. Give us a follow on Twitter. Reach out to me. You know, I reached out to Tom on a whim midweek from Poland, saying that I was flying over for the game, and it'd be great to catch up or whatever. And this is even better. Obviously, to jump on a podcast. I didn't ask for this, but you know, it's a privilege, and I'd love to be in the rotation, even when I get back down to Australia in the future. So we'll see how that all goes, but yeah, I'd love to engage with more Brighton fans, because I don't have a lot of Brighton friendships out there, and this is a new journey for me. And to Tom's point as well, I messaged him the other day with a really nice story on The Guardian about Ange Postecoglou. It was called what was it? Was it not patron Postecoglou? Anyway, it was a really nice story. Obviously, he's a massive story in Australia right now. He's the first Australian that's ever managed a Premier League team. He's doing really good things with Tottenham, but it was just about more the journey of a fan base, and that was a very pertinent point after what happened against Athens on Thursday, and just enjoying this ride for what it is. And I certainly will be. So yeah, it was really nice to join all of you, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Top man, Phil. Really appreciate you.
Thank you everyone for joining us in the chat as well. Don't forget to drop Phil a follow on social media, and we can envelop him even more into this cult of Brighton and Hove Albion. Don't forget to check out One Klopp Shop even for extra discounts if you type in Albion Obsessed, all one word. You can get 10% off amazing vintage football shirts. So check those guys out as well. But all that's left to say from me is wherever you may be, whenever you may be, we'll see you next time. Take care.